Red Scare.
Okay. The Second Red Scare is the fear of communism that spread through American politics, culture, and society from the late 1940s to 1950s. Truman created a federal employee loyalty program to assuage fear that there were communist spies in the government. There were investigations of 3 million federal employees to see if they had an association with communists, but they were dismissed without a hearing. This is known as McCarthyism because Senator Joseph McCarthy said communists had infiltrated the U.S. State Department. An anti-communist effort was built upon the tactics developed during the initial Red Scare, such as the FBI and other patriotic organizations. People became wary of capitalism because of its failure during the Great Depression.
So because of this growing fear of communism within the country, millions of workers were screened and dismissed because of loyalty charges. And industries created lists of who to blacklist, and these people had it very hard to find work. The screenings expanded past the federal government to local and state governments as well. Even some universities made it mandatory to swear a loyalty oath. Loyalty tests were taken up in about 20% of the labor force, so it affected Americans' everyday lives and perpetuated this growing fear of the enemy within. There was also this fear of unemployment because once you were tainted, it was very hard to find work. People stopped joining organizations such as the NAACP because joining an organization had the connotation of being a communist. Some pieces of legislation that were passed to thwart communism included the Smith Act, also known as the Alien Registration Act of 1940, which made it illegal to advocate the overthrow of the government or be in a group that advocates the overthrow of the government. The McCarran Internal Security Act required communist organizations to register with the government, and these so-called communists could be deported. Both of these acts allowed for limitations of free speech for the benefit of national security.
The House Un-American Activities Committee, or the HUAC, was a standing committee in the House of Representatives. It investigated the alleged disloyalty of private citizens, public employees, and organizations for having communist ties. Although it was formally started in 1938, the beginnings of it started in the Senate in 1918 and 1919. The Overman Committee investigated German as well as Bolshevik elements in the United States and sparked the first Red Scare. It was replaced in the 1930s by the Fish Committee. Hamilton Fish used the specific committee to investigate suspected public employees for being communists. He also used this committee to specifically attack the American Civil Liberties Union. In 1934, it was replaced by the McCormick-Dickstein Committee, which was most famous for uncovering the business plot. In 1938, it was later
Replaced.
It was later replaced by the DA's Committee, which was renamed the HUAC. They blacklisted the Hollywood 10, which was a practice of denying employment to screenwriters, actors, directors, musicians, and other American entertainment professionals during the mid-20th century for having communist ties. President Harry S. Truman hated this committee and called it the most un-American thing in the government. In June 2016, Newt Gingrich wanted to reinstate it, but for searching out Islamic terrorists in the government.
The media is a great place for artists to voice their opinions about society and bring to attention problems that they have with society. So as we read in the book Death of a Salesman, there was lots of discussion about communism and capitalism and consumerism and what were the benefits of either one. But expression like this was limited by fear of persecution from the HUAC. And so that had a great impact on American pop culture and society, and a lot of stifling of the arts happened in that time. Because these methods are basically censorship of the media, the issue of violation of the First Amendment came into play. So screenwriters that supported the Hollywood 10 and wanted to fight for their justice formed the Committee of the First Amendment, which protested the HUAC hearings, and they even had a show called Hollywood Fights Back, which aired on ABC. And efforts such as these, along with the public awareness of what was happening with the HUAC, eventually got the HUAC to become the House of Internal Security Committee and no longer seek out communists. I came out to have a good time, and I'm honestly feeling really attacked right now.
Go.
State your full name.
Ring Lardner Jr.
Is it true that you attend Marxist meetings on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays?
It's Mondays, Wednesdays, and Sundays.
Are you sympathetic to the communist cause? Red.
Filmmakers weren't the only people targeted by HUAC. Unions were an easy target, and a lot of the people in unions were African Americans. And so to fight against accusations suppressing unions, Nebraska voters approved a right-to-work constitutional amendment. The amendment and related laws said that any worker could refuse to join a union and refuse to pay dues or fees associated with bargaining efforts, even if those bargaining efforts would provide better wages for all workers in the company. Supporters of the act said that it would make it more difficult for communists to infiltrate union organizations and use them as a vehicle for disrupting the economic and political stability of Nebraska. So, moving back to Hollywood, Hollywood dominated American popular culture at the dawn of the Civil War. In 1946, cinema box offices made up 90% of American total spending on entertainment, with weekly attendance at the nation's movie houses approaching 90 million at the time. And it was at this time that Los Angeles became the epicenter of the film industry. But Los Angeles was also the home to one of the most active sectors of the Communist Party in the United States. So this spurred a real fear of communist infiltration in the movie picture industry, and the idea that the Communist Party could use films to disseminate Soviet propaganda. And an example of this targeting of Hollywood actors that we can all relate to is in his play The Crucible. Arthur Miller intended to use the Salem witch trials as an allegory for the anti-communist Red Scare and the congressional hearings of Senator Joseph McCarthy going on in the United States at that time. And Arthur Miller was subpoenaed. Subpoenaed. Arthur Miller was subpoenaed by the HUAC, and he was accused of participating in subversive activities. And because he refused to snitch, he was blacklisted, fined, and sentenced to a month in prison. And eventually he was released. This era of very public ordeal inspired many films, one of which is On the Waterfront, where a dock worker heroically chooses to break the waterfront code of silence, and he turns in his fellow workers to HUAC. And another film that's kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum is Storm Center, where a librarian refuses to pull down a communist book from the shelves, which means she lost her job and was falsely barred a communist. So these films took on the issues of, they started tackling issues of First Amendment violations that the HUAC was encountering, and there was a movement of films surrounding issues of dark paranoia.